Everybody would claim their seats, and most people are. Our guest speaker is here, and so we're going to start.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Before our event starts off, I just want to make a quick welcome to the Open Gov Hub. So my name is Neda Zufti, and I'm the manager here at Open Gov Hub. Just a quick background is that the Open Gov Hub was established in late 2012 and was founded as the first co-working community to focus on open government issues. So we exist to help open government advocates to be more efficient and effective in their work through sharing resources such as workspace and meeting space, but also through collaborative community. And so helping host events like this is an important way that we contribute to exchanging ideas around these shared topics. So really excited to be with you all this morning. Our community currently includes about 40 organizations and about 200 people who are all focused on these issues of transparency, accountability, and civic participation all around the world. And the last thing I'll just say quickly is that we have 4 strategic themes, which are cross-cutting areas of focus for this community. And one of them is around promoting the impact of open data. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at our website, get to know some of our member organizations who are also here in the room, and explore potential ways to partner. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to George Ingram, co-chair of MFAN, to introduce our event and their speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting us today. Welcome, everybody. I think as most of you know, the Modernizing Foreign Assistance Network is a coalition of organizations and individuals devoted to making foreign assistance more effective and efficient. In the last couple of years, we have focused specifically on accountability and ownership. And within accountability, we've really focused on evaluation, transparency, and using data and evaluations for learning. This morning, we are going to hone in on transparency and specifically on the use of data. We are pleased and honored to have with us Representative Ted Poe of Texas. My notes say that he is a champion of transparency and evaluation on the Hill. I would say he is the champion. And most notably, he authored and shepherded through the Foreign Assistance, the Foreign Aid Transparency and Accountability Act. It was a long process, 5 years. So he stuck with it for 5 years. Many of us got to know his staffer, Luke Murray, very well. And we really want to take this opportunity to thank Congressman Poe for his leadership, and thank you for joining us today. And on this, what is about the anniversary of FATA.
Thank you for letting me stop by. It's good to see all of y'all here, in case you wonder what that means. Y'all is singular, all y'all is plural. So anyway, I just want to take a few minutes to thank you for being here. All of you are here for individual personal reasons. And when you mention foreign aid, foreign assistance to anyone, they have an immediate reaction to that. Some people feel good. Some people, cross their arms and are just frustrated because they don't really like foreign assistance. That has been kind of the trend, I think, for the 50 years, now 55 years since foreign assistance came into being. And having transparency and accountability to what we do for other people throughout the world is a real good thing. And what I was mentioning, probably I see a lot of folks here about the age of my kids. Oh, you're like them. They want to save the world, I mean, they have done that. They didn't get that from me. They got it from their mother, I'm sure. I mean, my son, he goes off to Zambia and works with Doctors Without Borders. got a daughter that spent a lot of time in Honduras. The day after she got there, she was robbed of everything she had, including her passport. But she stayed anyway and worked and helped folks. Another daughter went to Ethiopia and spent some time there. And then my fourth child, well, she went to the beach. And so, but anyway, there's something in you personally that has this desire to help other folks. That is a real good thing, and I commend you for that. And so what we do through legislation in the Foreign Affairs Committee and Foreign Aid Transparency Act, which did take 5 years to get passed through Congress, it monitors what is done through federal funds throughout the world. And when I came to Congress, and I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I was somewhat cynical, like a lot of folks, about foreign assistance. I'll just level with you. But the more I spent time here, more I got to talk to folks like you and see the good things that happen with assistance. And we should do it for a multitude of reasons. We should assist folks throughout the world because it helps them and their community. And we have it within our power in the United States because of the great abundance that we have to help other people. And I think we have a moral obligation to help folks. And that alone is good enough to justify all of the things that y'all are doing. But it goes further than that. It helps our relationship with whoever individual or community as a country. It helps our relationship. But foreign assistance is more than, it has the effect of more than just assistance. It develops in areas security for those communities. Security. When you have women, for example, who don't have water, so they have to travel miles, and then there's a well, and it's held by bad guys who abuse that lady so she can get water. That's the decision some people have to make in the world. And then she takes the water and goes back to her village. And then when she needs water again, she comes back. And the same thing happens. That should not happen in the world anywhere. So by helping that community get water and water wells to secure community, more secure. And you have less criminal conduct abusing folks if you have that. And that's a good thing as well. But I want to commend you for what you do. And when we take assistance and we see the good things that happen from it through transparency and accountability, then more people will be convinced that we should be doing this. Everybody's heard about the abuses of assistance, where we pay millions of dollars for a project like the gas plant in Afghanistan, and then it was never used. That type of thing. In Iraq, you've all heard the stories of assistance where it was abused by the government. Well, we know about those, and the public hears about those. Transparency, accountability will help individuals know that when we use assistance working through NGOs, and if it's successful, then more people will do. I'll say this again. The United States has it within their power to help communities throughout the world. And the idea that people do not have sanitary water, when we can help those communities have sanitary water or even water, then we ought to be doing that. It's an obligation we have. We should share things that we have and the knowledge we have to go and, like I said earlier, save the world. I mean, that's really what y'all are doing. So I commend you for that, MFAN, for helping us get this accountability. across the line to see what works. Things that work, we want to continue to help those projects. And if they're not working, then we won't use them anymore. And get the public misconception that when you talk about foreign assistance, people think, we're spending 30% of the budget on foreign assistance. That is not true. It's barely 1%. 1% of the budget doing all these wonderful things. Transparency, accountability. Let people know the good things that are happening. Let people know that things that aren't working, we will fix them or we will get rid of them. And at the end of the day, somebody somewhere in the world, their life is better because of the things you do and the funding that we can get from the federal government. So I could talk forever. I will not do that. But thanks to you, George, for letting me be here, and MFAN for what the work to do done to get this legislation passed. And it's a bipartisan thing. I'm going to say this out. It's bipartisan. It's bipartisan, and Republicans, Democrats have supported this legislation. Most legislation that's bipartisan is successful, and this is one of those that is very successful. And we're just going forward to save the world. Thank you very much. Thank you, George.
Let me thank you for those very personal and connecting to you as a person and you as a family, what everybody here does. For being on this path with us to save it. And to understanding how important foreign assistance is and how important it is in transparency and evaluation. And I want to say something else to you and to everybody here, and because I know you don't have much to do these days, you want to know what the next step is on aid effectiveness. Many of us have come to recognize in the last few months that the way the aid architecture of the U.S. government is structured has an impact on aid. And we've been very concerned the last few months of a lot of rumors out there they're going to reorganize foreign aid without doing it in a careful, thoughtful process. And last week, MFAN issued a series of principles to guide any aid reorganization. So please take that back with you to the Hill, share it with your colleagues. And this is a living document. It's online. There have been 100 signers so far. So please go online, pick up this sheet out front, and join this effort to emphasize to the Congress, to the executive branch, how important it is that any aid reorganization is done in the fall.
I agree with that, George. Thank you very much.
You ready? On? Is it on now? There we go. Is that better? How about that? Thank you all. My four panelists here. Many of them you may know. To my right is Dennis Vega, who's at the State Department. Get your title right. Sure. Managing Director for Planning, Performance, and Systems in the Office of the Foreign Assistance Resource. Next to him is Kim Smith, who's the Senior Financial Economist in AID's Office of Development Cooperation in PPL. To her left is Hector Corrales, who we knew a few years ago as the Director of International Cooperation for Honduras and is now in the Honduran Embassy in Washington as of 4 months ago. Yep. And Agnieszka, is that okay?
That's perfect.
Agnieszka Rawa, who's the Managing Director of the MCC and PEPFAR partnership that is called the Data Collaboratives for Local Impact. Thank you all for joining us today. We have fortunate to have a panelist who have been very much involved in the process of working inside government to make assistance more transparent. So they bring a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, a lot of frustration to this process. And as I was talking to Dennis before, as many of us have gone through this process with them over the last 5 years, it has seemed like a very slow, tedious process with not much progress. But you look back over 5 years, and actually, you have to wake up and say, there's been real progress. And we're here today to talk about that progress, to talk about what else needs to be done, and particularly to focus on sort of that next step in aid transparency, which is ensuring that it is used. I'd like to start out with Hector. Hector in Honduras, I'm going to say 5 years ago, Hector was up here 3 years ago on a panel at the Brookings Institution talking about the aid transparency system in Honduras, because Honduras was at the cutting edge of a country that was developing a system to share data among government agencies and to make it publicly available. And if you could describe that program a little bit for us, sort of to set a background.
Thank you, George, and thank you to the MFAN team and for setting up this event. So, like George mentioned, I was the Director of International Cooperation when we were putting the system in place. And I mean, in very few words, it was a system that allowed us to go from physical records to digital records. And there's a couple of things that are meaningful about that. And the first one is that it allows us to search information faster and get it quicker to our decision makers. The other one is that it makes us a stronger counterpart. If we're informed about what's going on in our country and about the donors' activities there, then we can have a more sophisticated conversation at the table with them. And that goes all the way to the negotiating table when we're negotiating country strategies. So if we know what's happening, we can demand with a louder voice what it is that donors need to align with in our country. And so that brings me to, I think, the crux of this is that alignment depends as much on the donor commitment as much as country leadership. And the other thing that I really saw the value in was the continuity, the institutional continuity of, well, the institution that handles donor relations and aid management. And you guys might have experienced this. Government transitions can sometimes be rocky, and so the responsibility of managing aid and managing donor relations can shift from institution to institution, and documents can get lost in transition. So having digital records really allowed us to prevent that. And I can say that after being in the Ministry of Planning and the aid management responsibility moving to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that transition was flawless in that regard. So I'm very happy about that. And the quick gains from having digital records are mostly for us to manage data. But I think also one of the most important ones is that everything that we feed into the platform has an outward-facing platform for people to use. So that's the transparency aspect of it, and that's what we're starting to see gains and pushing for these gains in events like this.
And Hector, what kicked off the process? Was it a strong leader of the planning ministry? Was it a situation of the president couldn't find papers and data? Was it a report? What kicked it off? What was catalytic?
Right. So there was a combination of things, but I think the catalytic thing was the creation of the Ministry of Planning and a strong institutional mandate, a legal mandate to focus on aid effectiveness. So all of these things led to donors saying, okay, we will support aid effectiveness. And the European Union, Spain, and Canada said, all right, we'll give you money to set up an aid management platform. And so that's how it started. And The previous director, before I got there, started the process of, getting the contract ready and getting everything set up. And then I was responsible for getting my team to get everything together, feeding it, and becoming a call center once a month to badger donors about where's our data. So that was what kicked it off. Yeah.
Very good. Kim, you for several years have been leading the AID effort on aid transparency, overseeing that. Aid has, is the biggest source of aid data for the United States. Last year, you and your colleagues wrote a 4-phase plan to improve the management. What have been a couple of big changes, improvements that you've made, and what's the next step you want to see with your work?
Thank you, George. I'd also like to thank MFAN, Open Gov Hub, and the Congressman for being here and organizing this event. Thanks to you all for coming. You said, George, USAID, and all of us here have made a lot of progress over the last 5 years. And before I answer your question on exactly what it is we've achieved and where we're going, I wanted to just take a step back maybe and talk about where we started, maybe for all those in the room that haven't been following this step by step along the way. So I can say that the U.S. government has always been publishing its information on foreign assistance. USAID, on behalf of the U.S. government, for decades has published the Green Book, which is a report to Congress each year. And we also report on official development assistance, ODA, to the OECD DAC. So it's not that, this is a new thing. We've been doing this for a long time. So I could say that we have been transparent, but what we haven't been was timely. So in July of 2013, USAID began reporting timely data to foreignassistance.gov, which is a website that Dennis's team at the State Department manages. And we started doing that on a quarterly basis, very detailed information on every single penny that the agency spends on development and humanitarian assistance funding. And that was a big step. But we realized quickly that we had a lot further, a long way to go, because the information that we were sending to state each quarter, which was then repackaged into the appropriate XML format and pushed to the IADI registry, wasn't as robust as it should be. While all the dollars and cents were there, we were missing a lot of qualitative information, descriptive information. I think we were fulfilling about 1/3 of the requested IADI fields. So, like you said, George, we undertook either at some of your requests or pressure.
Why are you looking at Sally?
Looking at Sally. We undertook probably a 6-month effort to come up with our IADI cost management plan. And that plan, in the process of doing that, we looked at, okay, what data fields are we currently publishing? What are we not publishing? What can we publish? And how are we going to get there? So I would say first, doing the plan, and the plan was approved by then the acting administrator of USAID. So having the plan, having high-level, senior-level buy-in, and executing the plan was certainly, it took us from being 1/3, reporting on 1/3 of the data fields to 2/3, which is great. But again, we still have more work to do. And I think next steps for us is trying to improve the descriptiveness and the quality of our activity titles and descriptions. And also we're exploring ways to pull in results data. Also trying to see if we can report on subnational geographic information. So we're still running the marathon, and I will leave it up to all of you to judge how quickly we're running that marathon. But it is a marathon, and it's certainly not.
And that on those steps that need to be improved, that sounds like it's not one person sitting at a computer doing that. It's all the way down the line and changing how the data is actually originally entered into the system.
Exactly. So the data is coming out of USAID's corporate systems, which are our financial system and our procurement system. It's not a aid management information system or a project system. So you have people all around the world and USAID missions all around the world, and all the offices in Washington are entering information. And they've been doing it for decades. But now we're making that certain fields in those systems public. And we have this ongoing effort to make people aware that these specific fields will be made public, so that you should put in actual intelligent activity titles and descriptions that are written in English and meant for an outside audience.
So all you have to do is get thousands of people to change their behavior.
That's right.
All right, good. And final question, you're doing a pilot in Bangladesh now, which I gather is not just a pilot for Bangladesh, but you hope to learn lessons from this that will be relevant to the rest of the region.
Yeah, exactly. The work that we're doing in Bangladesh right now is very exciting because it goes to the heart of data use, awareness raising, and improving the quality of the data. So we are working with Friends of Publish What You Fund in an effort to see if we can automatically read in EID data into Bangladesh's AIMS, so their Aid Information Management System. So like Hector said, most countries, not all, but most countries do have an AIMS, and they request information from the donors in country each quarter, and many times you have to badger them to get the information, because usually it's a very manual process, whether it's, for example, the USAID mission in Bangladesh was manually filling in an Excel spreadsheet each quarter and sending it back to the Ministry of Finance or Foreign Affairs. And this is happening in most of our missions and most of the countries where we work, this manual reporting into the information management systems each quarter. So most of the information that's requested from the AIMS is already in the EID data. So the idea is if we can automatically pull in EID data into the AIMS, it reduces the reporting burden on the mission, it increases the quality of the data. And we were able to do that in Bangladesh, but we had to really look at our data first. So there's a great software developer in Bangladesh we were working with, who was working in Bangladesh. And for 15 donors, this automatic EID to AIMS link was working, but it wasn't working for USAID because our data was not structured properly. And we really had to look at the way our data was structured and reformat it. So we had to improve data quality before our data could be used and read into the AIMS. And basically what we did was we reduced all the noise in the data, and we rolled up a lot of administrative records, overhead expenses. And once we did that, the data was able to be read in. And now the mission realizes, okay, this is going to reduce our reporting burden each quarter. And now they're willing to go back into those corporate systems that we talked about before and enter good activity titles and good descriptions because they know that the data is going to be used and it's going to be published. So it's this cycle of, and we talk about this all the time, do we improve data quality to get to data use, or do you need to use the data to improve the data quality? And I think it's very much a mixture of both.
Thank you. Dennis, you've been at the center of all this for the whole U.S. government. So you're responsible for what's not working, right?
That's one way to put it.
No, seriously. Congratulations and thank you for the progress that has been made across the U.S. government in the last 5 years. As I said before, it felt like there wasn't much progress, but you look back and there has been real progress. Congratulations, because you've been at the center of what has been a challenging and painful process at times, both from within the government and outside the government. People like Sally. Thank you. Before I ask you the big question, any follow-on or comment on what Kim was talking about on the Bangladesh pilot?
So we're working with USAID. We went to Malawi in the fall and are doing something similar and trying to look to see how we can enrich the data that we're getting through the IATI process. And it's basically the same thing, but in Malawi.
Right. So step back for a minute. Talk about the process that you have led the State Department through. You go from the MCC being a young agency with transparency born in its genes and maybe one or several data systems to AID that uses data all the time but has multiple data systems that don't work together. The State Department, which is much more a policy institution and much less driven and based on data. So you've had a more difficult task there, and Kim's had at AID or other people at MCC. Talk about that and what the obstacles are and what the progress is that you make.
Sure. So I don't think it'll surprise any of you that the State Department has not historically been a transparent organization. So that's a big challenge just from the get-go. Just kind of bring it up a little bit in the whole U.S. government. I mean, the issues that we have with fragmented foreign assistance across 22 agencies, kind of from a policy coordination perspective, is the same issues we have from a data perspective, that you have multiple agencies that do things very differently, that have different systems. So just coordinating all of those different things into trying to make some sort of standardization is one of the most difficult things that we have to do in leading this process. And you think of just simple things like how we divide the world. So the State Department divides regions in one way, the USAID divides regions in another way, the DoD divides it by COCOMs, Peace Corps divides it a little bit differently. So even that simple kind of regional division is already hard. So when you look at thinking about how we talk about all of these data elements and use that information, it's very difficult to try to do that across 22 agencies. So that's just kind of one of the bigger things. From the State Department, I mean, part of the issue you have is that we're retroactively trying to use financial systems to produce data that they were never intended to be used for. So because we're trying to do timely and quarterly, and we don't have kind of enterprise-wide program management or project management or aid management systems, you're using the financial systems to give you information. So there's a lot of gaps. And then the other problem you have with that is that the people that are entering the financial management information are not the program people, they're the financial folks. So when you look at those data sets, the type of data that's in there is very different. We've gone through a process over the last 3.5 years since I've been there, really looking at not looking at the aid transparency and accountability part, but we're really focusing on switching it to saying, working with the department on, you need these changes to be able to do your job well. And then we'll worry about, hey, can we post this publicly? But when we started off, when I first got there, we were really focused on, look, we need to provide this data, it needs to be public. And you're not going to win a lot of people in the department on, hey, we're going to make you do more work and put more effort in so that we can provide things to the public that, in their eyes, someone can use against them or misuse, especially since the data is not that great right now. So we really focused on not just the end, which is one of the issues that George and I have talked about this a lot of. We focus a lot on the accountability and the transparency aspect, but really you have to focus on kind of every part of that. If you don't have good strategic planning and people that understand how to plan well, if you don't have good program design and performance management all the way throughout, then you're not going to, you can have as much as you want on evaluation and on accountability, but it doesn't matter because people don't have the skills on the front end to end up with a good product at the end. So one of the things we focus on, and because I manage strategic plan performance management and aid transparency efforts for the State Department, is really focusing on building that culture all the way throughout. And that is not a 2-year thing. That's not a 5-year thing. That's not even a 10-year thing. I mean, that is really a hard way to try to help people think about different ways that they're making decisions and different things that they need to make better decisions. It's basically modernizing decision making within the department, because we're still making decisions kind of based on a model that's 50 years old, right? So we talk about modernizing, and this is kind of one of the things that we really need to do a better job of, is teaching our Foreign Service Office, our diplomats, how to use data throughout all their decision-making processes. And then once we get that and we can build systems around it, then we'll end up with a good end product that we can share publicly. But we can't just focus on the accountability and the transparency, because even Representative Poe's example of Afghanistan, it's great that we know that we wasted money, or in his eyes, money was wasted, but that's because we didn't do good planning. We didn't have good program design. We didn't know what other people were doing. We didn't know what the needs were. We didn't use all the data that's available to be able to make the best decisions possible. And that's a big shift for a place like the State Department and most people, that are in these jobs. So.
That's that last ending was a very nice charge of why the data is so important and why it's better. Agnieszka. 2 years ago, 2015, PEPFAR and MCC came together to develop this data collaborative. Give us a status report on that. What countries are you in? I think the aim was to work not just with governments, but with citizens too, civil society, to try to push the envelope on using data for results. So tell us where that stands. Not on yet. Yes.
No.
Here we go.
Okay, how's that? Okay. Well, thank you very much also, and to MFAN for organizing this timely event and a topic that's really dear to my heart. And thank you to the audience for coming. I think that one of the challenges that we're all facing is that data is not an easy convener. It's scary to a lot of people. So that's part of it. The Data Collaboratives for Local Impact emerged, as George said, out of a partnership between the President's Emergency Response Plan for HIV and AIDS and the Millennium Challenge Corporation. PEPFAR is the funder. MCC has led the design and implementation of the program. Early on, we found that really the ability to use this data, this information, is lacking at all levels in a number of our partner countries. This is in MCC partner countries and PEPFAR partner countries. And that's a real problem, because we're creating all of this information. The data supply is generally increasing. I think we all are aware of that. So the information that is placed on the foreignassistance.gov site is there. A number of our partner countries have open data portals with increasing numbers of data sets. And PEPFAR, for example, has been increasing the type of data and its granularity that it's making available to its partners on its site. But nobody is using that data, or very few people are. And I think in some ways our beginning also built on the findings of a study that Kimberly was involved in, the USAID A Transparency Country Pilot Assessment. And very true. So data is not being used, and it's not being used to make a difference in people's lives, which I think, again, aligned with what Congressman Ted Poe said. That is why a number of us are doing this work. So the vision behind the Data Collaboratives for Local Impact is to demonstrate and showcase the effective uses of data by government, citizens, and other stakeholders at the country level, at the national level, where this capacity is really the lowest. To do what? To contribute, of course, in part to enhanced PEPFAR programmatic results on the ground, and to enable the country itself to take on the burden of contributing to the control of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. But really, we also think that the ability to use data by different stakeholders in the country, whether they are government stakeholders, civil society, NGOs, or communities, has direct impact on that country's ability to drive its own programmatic results, which is equally important. And it's very important because countries have very scarce budget resources, which is why we're providing them with foreign aid assistance in the first place. And so they need to be able to align in a way that's based on data, those scarce resources, with priorities, and be able to get the data skills that will help them lift themselves out of poverty. So how are we doing this? The DCLI model includes investments in 3 core projects that I just want to briefly describe. And we are operational in Tanzania right now. The first core project is essentially what we call a data lab, the Tanzania D Lab. And its role is to be a focal point in the country to bring the spotlight to the use of data and to provide both training as well as data science resources to individuals, institutions, and organizations that want to be able to better use their data. The data lab has been operational for about a year right now. It has provided training to Tanzanians, to over 300 Tanzanians from across the country. It has also sparked collaborations with a number of organizations so that they could mine their data and apply it constructively to make an impact on the ground. The training has mostly focused on the health sector stakeholders, and 48% of the individuals that were trained were women. One of the things that's also been very exciting is that the lab has been actively sought after and been supporting the National Bureau of Statistics. And this is in spite of kind of a challenging policy environment in Tanzania, and an evolving one, I would say. Thanks to Sally and many others, we also have been trying to raise the awareness of YADI data in all of our consultations and programs. So the data lab informs the stakeholders it interacts with on this resource and encourages them to use it actively. So another project, I mentioned there are 3, so the second one is essentially targeted at individuals, entrepreneurs, youth. So there are a number of people in Tanzania and across Africa that are the data wizards and that have those skills that I think are in such need in order to be able to put data to good use. And so this is a challenge program where specific priorities and needs are identified, and then help is solicited from those entrepreneurs. So just to give you an example, about a year and a half ago or so, the Tanzanian Ministry of Public Health published what they call the Health Facilities Registry with support from PEPFAR, actually. And nobody was using the data. Again, same story. Why? They didn't know about it. They don't have the basic skills to access it, to know how to utilize it. And so a challenge was organized around this, and to try to get entrepreneurs and innovators to leverage this information. And to give you an example, one of the winners of these grants and challenges was proposing something as simple as enabling, through the development of a simple SMS-based app, using that data to allow citizens in rural areas to determine whether there are health facilities close to them and whether that health facility has the type of services that this individual may need. A third project is one that we're very excited about, and is probably the newest member of the Data Collaborators for Local Impact family. It's called Data Zetu, and that means our data in Swahili. It seeks to take the data revolution and this gap in data use skills to the subnational level, where really the gap is the largest and the needs, development assistance needs, are the greatest. So Data Zetu has just started, but in the first 5 months, it has sparked significant interest amongst subnational, district level and ward level officials. A ward in Tanzania is a jurisdiction that has the equivalent of about 5,000 to 15,000 individuals. And what they have found is that at that level, the officials are constantly being asked to send data up the chain. And they do that without the skills to actually leverage the data that they have, which is a real shame and a real inefficiency. And it does contribute to problems with the data quality, and then losses of some of the data that at its origin is disaggregated and then gets lumped at the national level. So we're really excited about this third project. There was an incredible moment just a couple of weeks ago when our team was in Tanzania, where a district level official from the Kyela district was listening to a presentation by one of the innovators from the other project, and was so excited about the predictive analytics on school dropout rates that this woman was proposing, that he immediately invited her to his district and said, I will share the data with you, and please come and start helping us to be able to see the value of our own data. I did want to mention that the Data Collaborators for Local Impact is also collaborating with the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, which I think is important because, again, a number of our counterpart countries have adopted the SDGs, and yet, like many of us, including the United States, they don't have all of the data needed to track progress in a number of goals that are material to people's lives around the world. So there has been a lot of interest in this work, and data use is equally important as data supply.
Great, thank you. There's seats in the front here if anybody wants to come in and have a seat, please. Okay, let's do a second rapid round, because I want to get to the audience before we get to the breakout session. 1 minute apiece on data use. And, how do you get civil society to use the data in the D labs? What's been the challenges in your country in Honduras on getting that data use? Kim and Dennis, what are the challenges that you all are confronting, and what are the successes that you have in getting the data use and the hurdles? And yes, 1 minute.
Challenges, many challenges. I think the recurring challenge is a lower capacity than we expected, which is why we decided to invest in this program in the first place. So even in the setup of the lab, which we really wanted it to be a Tanzanian lab, so it's based at the University of Dar es Salaam, it's been a challenge recruiting the data scientists or even individuals with basic, simple data skills to visualize data to be able to then do the training. I'd say that the most promising aspect of our work, however, has been that once organizations and individuals experience what data can do for them, and they see the power of data, then it becomes easier. So we're, across all projects, we have established a process that we call data use stories, which essentially tries to showcase and document those experiences through which either at an individual level or at an organizational level, this simple data analytics has contributed to a change, a material impact and change in the way the work is done on the ground.
Hector, you got that one working yet? Why don't you hand that over?
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Agnieszka said about the low capacity is one of the biggest challenges. But then the other thing is that the low capacity of government. But the low capacity of government to create these capacities. And so I wish I had, Agnieszka's budget to, go out to the subnational level and train people how to use it and let them know that the data exists. Another thing is that, the supply of data right now is like a fire hose being put down your throat, and if people don't know what to do with it and how to visualize it and how to get insights from that, other than data scientists. And another example that I wanted to give, it's a caricature example, but when we came into that building, we saw a really cool screen with, ones and zeros giving the address, and it's the Open Government Hub building. We didn't see a PDF, scrolling down. And so while we're getting these numbers, a lot of the people in the country don't know, what they mean. And I think it goes down again to the impact evaluation and, translating the development lingo for people to understand what that is. And then impact evaluations are skewed towards showing success. And so we need more independent impact evaluation. So it's educating the audience, and it's giving usable and valuable information information, not data. There's a difference.
So I definitely agree with what they both said, but I'll focus on a different aspect, which is lack of awareness. And really lack of awareness within USAID. Even in Washington, I feel they just don't know that this data is available. So I think in order to promote data use, we need to increase data awareness within our own agency and get, like we're doing in Bangladesh, get our missions to start using the information and see it as an asset. And once that happens, then I think data quality will.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what everyone said, I think one of the big things for us is capacity within the government and our ability to use our own data and produce good data. So I think those are the things that are hindering data use. When you look at a lot of the requirements that we put on people of producing data or asking them to use different data sets or do evaluation, it ends up being an additive function to their current jobs. So they really don't have the ability to do that well and the other things that they should be doing. So I think that from an internal aspect of getting people to really use the data within the State Department or within some of these other agencies as they're making they're making their decisions, not having that capacity makes it harder for them to use good data that can be elsewhere because they don't have the ability.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to you all. Jill, do we have an operative mic?
We'll see if this works.
I like this.
It's green.
That's work. Okay, there's a gentleman in the back. Other people who have questions.
Hi, thank you very much for this very interesting panel. My name is Jean-Louis Sarvive. I'm the CEO of Development Gateway and one of your co-hosts here. One of the things that struck me listening to the very interesting conversation is the fact that I'm not sure we are gaining knowledge from all the many activities that are existing in very parallel ways. I was really struck that for each one of the presentations, I don't know how much you know, for example, and I'm sorry to be putting the spotlight on my organization, how much do you know about what we do? Because we have built a Yati importer for AIMS. We have we've done quite a bit of work on the visualizations of data, and I encourage you to look at the Results Data Initiative because we have really begun to focus away from the collection and visualizations of data to the use of it. And together with the Gates Foundation, we have done some very interesting work on the fact that we really not often enough ask the two key questions: data for what and data for whom. And I think that one of the things that seems to be, and I'm glad that we have a network, but how much of the network is building on what the various members are doing rather than operating in parallel ways without much information being shared. So that's the challenge that I would like to give to ourselves, to be better knowledge sharers than we have been and avoid the repetitions of silos very often in competition with one another. Thank you.
Just thank you so much for that, and I couldn't agree more. And I did want to let you know that we are working with your team and developing, yes, and we met Dennis's team and my team met with Karen just a few weeks ago to talk about where you have aims and this IADI importer, and we're looking at, I think we've identified 5 or 6 countries that we'd like to pursue joint work, kind of following up to the work we've done in Bangladesh. So, we know that there is a community out there, and we rely on the expertise of others. And I think you're right. Like the more we leverage each other's collective knowledge, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the second part of your question, who the data for whom? I mean, I think that is a very difficult question to answer because when you look at the data we're trying to collect, the audiences, I mean, when we have these feedback sessions or try to get input on what people want to see, what are the priorities, the audiences are so different that, and the types of data that they care about and the levels of data is so different that it is a struggle for us to figure out where even we should prioritize because for some people, congressional staff or people that care about those types of things, it's very specific account data that tracks with how the appropriations bills are done. For someone at recipient country, civil society, they care about data to show kind of what's happening there. Are people getting what they're supposed to be getting? For a department or agency, higher level decision makers, it's what are the long-term results that you're getting from the funding that you're getting, not inputs and outputs. So trying to figure out how we can manage these different needs from all the different audiences in a way that builds on each other so that you can start at a granular level and then work yourself up is a very difficult thing. And we struggle with that constantly of trying to figure out, okay, we are going away from input-output data in our kind of reporting. We're looking for more results, like long-term impact results data. But other people really want to know that kind of level of data at a very low-level, transactional, kind of award level thing. So just trying to figure out how you do that is very difficult. And it's something that we collectively struggle with and trying to figure out what the best approach is, because then it also affects how do you communicate? Who are you communicating to? Who are you focusing on with this outreach? And who are you developing these sites for? And do people really care about, like, how much effort on developing the foreignassistance.gov site should we be putting on those types of things, the things that are more granular, or is it really a U.S. focus, which is how we've taken the data visualization part, because people in recipient countries care about what all donors are doing. So it's a hard thing to manage when you're trying to figure that out. But you're right, we do have to think about who the data is for. It's for everyone is really the answer.
I want to do a follow-up on this because data is in the eyes of the beholder, and you can't talk about transparency, accountability, Honduras, and not talk about the illegal coup. I mean, Honduras is the poster boy for corruption and repression. Maybe you want to talk about the murder of environmental activists, for example.
So in an event about data, also I'm here as in a personal capacity as former director of international cooperation. I can say it's bad, it's terrible.
What are you doing about it?
I mean,
that's not the subject today.
Yeah, but
Stick to fiction.
Oh, yep, right here. So you want to answer
on that just a little bit?
Please.
Obviously not directly on that, but maybe, as I had mentioned, there are some challenges even in Tanzania and many of the countries where we operate at policy level. But I think one of the things that has been our approach is to try to change the ecosystem and who the users of this data are, and to build their capacity to ask questions and to drive this quest for more information and greater transparency. It's a very, very long journey. But in this case, I also wanted to highlight, for example, the last program that I talked about, that is Hector, which I feel is the hardest one, but it gets at the crux of the matter. It goes back to the individuals in communities. And rather than throwing data at them or expecting them to already know what it means, it starts with listening campaigns. It simply asks, communities and theme groups that are age appropriate and gender sensitive, what keeps you up at night? What are the challenges they're facing? And starts mapping them out systematically. And then trying to connect them to available data resources and technologies. So the idea here is that to have a sustainable solution to a number of these things, a more engaged society, civil society, you need to start having that capacity to use information and drive the entire cycle of improvement. It's a long-term process, but it is, I think, the right approach.
I have a question related to the Data Act. As you probably know, on May 9th, more data sets were available to the public as well as to agencies and donor recipients. How has that changed in terms of your reporting environment, your data elements, but also how has it impacted recipients or donor nations? Are you able to look at the data? Are you giving them grants, or are you working with them to look at American spending data and let them know how they can basically look at the data and identify?
So on the Data Act, I mean, one of the benefits of the Data Act was that agencies were already having to tweak their systems to be able to become compliant with Data Act. So we were able to work to try to get as much of the data elements that we need to the conversation. There's a lot of congressional action on different programs. Like there was like a program performance management act that just passed or something like that. So there's a lot of those things happening. We try to make sure that we're consistent with them and that we're involved in the conversations enough for our benefit, and also so that we can leverage the efforts already taken. So that's basically how we've been involved in the Data Act. Your second question was on, are we working with? We haven't really been working with recipient countries on information available through the Data Act portal. I mean, I think that's something to look at. We've been really focused on the IATI data. And I think that's basically the bigger focus for us, trying not to go into different direction.
Anything else before we move on to the panel?
First, I'd like to say, as a former U.S. diplomat, I can't tell you how many times I've had people show up from other agencies in my country saying, "Oh, I'm here to do this program," and no one had any idea that they were doing. So this is important just for the U.S. government to know what it's doing and be able to do it right and do it in a coordinated fashion. But one comment I'd like to make from my own use of foreignassistance.gov, for example, is that, and maybe I'm just using it wrong, but you can go in and you can get into these data sets very quickly, but you need to have sort of the upstream and downstream parts of this. And it seems, when I go in there, I can't, for example, get easily to find the CBJs, the Congressional Budget Justifications. I have to sort of go back out of there, go into f.state.gov, and find it that way. It seems to me it ought to be relatively easy to connect there. On the other hand, you have DEC, which has the project documents, evaluations, annual reports. And, to the extent that you could link to that, which of course has its own problems because I've never talked to anyone who thinks that DEC is actually a reasonably searchable database. But still, I think it's important to try and do those, and those are perhaps as much for the U.S. public affairs, helping people understand what foreign assistance is about, because the foreignassistance.gov's data sets are very hard for the average person. It's hard for me to understand, and I've been doing this for a while.
Yes, the good part of this question is there's demand out there.
That's good. I'll report back. I think we do have links to some of those things on there. Part of the problem you end up with when you're trying to do a site like this is you don't want it to be so many things that it's hard for people to kind of get the core information. So we really took an approach of building the site and focusing the visualization on like a common user that doesn't know anything about foreign assistance, just wants to look at how much money is going to these countries. And when we looked at, we basically had two user groups, ones that were super users that really focused on, I just want to get the data, I don't care about your website, so just let me download the data, and those that were people that didn't really know much. And most of our traffic is people that really just want to come and look at, see how much is going to this country, or this country's in the news, so they're just like, oh, well, let me go see. That's the main driver of our site. So that's what the visualization's focused on. We do have links to, like for the State Department, the evaluation public website on that. For USAID, we have links within the data sets to the strategies, to the evaluations that they have, and for other organizations. And part of our foreign aid transparency and accountability implementation is building out a public-facing site for the State Department that has strategies, program management information, and evaluations. And we will provide links on those. It's just, we have this conversation all the time of what should we visualize, what should we not. To me, the biggest gap we have is that we don't have that program level information, contextual information that you really would want to nest transaction underneath. So we're trying to figure out how to do that without currently having kind of enterprise-wide program management systems. So that's something that we're talking with Aid about. We have some things that we're trying to do based on other systems we have, like, as you know, the operational plan that has some contextual data in there, building some stuff off of that. So I hope that answers.
So with regards to the demand for data, it's surprising for a lot of people to hear that the people that demand the data the most and use the data the most in Honduras are actually the other donors when they're preparing their projects and their strategies to make sure that they're not duplicating efforts with other people. And so that speaks to the level of capacity that people need to have when they're using the data, and the level of interest and time to go research on DEC or this or even the Honduran government document. So that's an interesting question.
All right. It is now time to move to the breakout sessions. Before we do that, and before I thank the panel, Dennis, you get the last word. What's your debrief to your successor? What's your advice to him or her when he or she gets appointed in a year or two? And maybe you've got advice for the community on the role that the community can play in advancing.
First advice, don't answer your calls, but after that, I mean, I think that when I took this job, I tried really hard to kind of change our relationship with the community and really focus on kind of being open and transparent. Shocking. So I think that would be my advice is, a lot of what people think about what you're doing and misconceptions they have is because we're not talking. So I think that the more information you can share and be honest about what the limitations are, what you're trying to do, the more we can get support throughout. And I mean, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. I mean, my job is to help the U.S. government make better decisions using data in a better way, right? So, and your job is to make sure we're making good decisions by keeping us accountable. So we're both trying to meet the same goal. So that would be my biggest thing to my successor, and to keep doing things like this and keep pushing within the department and looking at things like I mentioned before, all the way through the program cycle, as Kate calls it, and focusing on how we do all of those things better. For the community, I think that, continue to do what you're doing, continue to push us to do more faster. I think that's an important role. The other thing I would say is, I've done, I don't know how many events like this over the last 3 years, and when I look around, it's a lot of similar faces. So we're talking to each other a lot, which is great because a lot of people don't even do that. But, we have to expand the community of people that care about this and, make it not as scary to people. So my advice to you is talk to colleagues or people that aren't really data folks, but really care about our foreign policy priorities and making better decisions, and bring them to these types of events, help them understand what we're trying to do, and kind of build out that, because they will talk to different people at the State Department and USAID and have different avenues to get more support internally for us as well. And thank you, everyone.
Dennis, you have been open, and we thank you for that. Have we always understood what you were doing? No, but that's as much our problem as yours. So
I don't understand that.
thank you. Just before we all thank the panelists, we are now going to move to a couple of workshops. After we thank the panelists, I'm going to, if the workshop leaders would come up here and explain what's going to happen, that would be great. And please join me in thanking Dennis, Kim, Hector, and Agnieszka. So if the workshop leaders would step up here, we have a working microphone at least.